Michelle, let's actually start with you now. I mean, why is this proposed two-part system actually happening?
There's many reasons, but I'll just focus on a few. So the first is through COVID, if there's one thing that we actually learned is for the majority of working South Africans who have some sort of savings, it's in their pension fund. And that doesn't help when times are tough or when there's emergencies or unforeseen circumstances such as we experienced with the COVID pandemic. And so from that idea, the thinking was, how do we make some sort of money from your pension fund accessible in the case of an emergency? Secondly, if we look at preservation levels. Now, if we look at the SuperFund Provident Fund, for example, less than 10% of members who are 5 years from retirement are anywhere near 45% of what they actually need in retirement. That's scary numbers. And so really what the two-part system is trying to achieve is also bringing in what we like to call compulsory preservation. So it's really preventing members from accessing all of their retirement savings every time they change jobs. So if you look at the full system, you then have your lifetime savings broken up into a component that'll be preserved until you reach retirement, and a component that will be there until retirement, but if you need it before that, then it will be available.
So, Malusi, I mean, there really has been a lot of media coverage around this one. It's quite a big one, and that immediate access to it, and some are seeing this as a solution to any form of financial crisis. I mean, we're in a financial crisis right now. I mean, there's no two ways about it. The recent budget speech also made reference to trustee discretion around this. Let's get your thoughts on it.
Thanks, Leanne. So, I mean, COVID was definitely the catalyst for this. In this country, we've been talking about retirement reform for more than 2 decades, which is a package of initiatives that aims at addressing some of the gaps in our retirement funding system. And COVID has really brought to the fore some of those gaps, very specifically the contradiction that on the one hand, retirement fund members have got full access to their retirement savings when they change jobs, and so they don't have adequate outcomes. But on the other, if they fall into financial distress while working, they don't have access to this wealth. So really, this second part of the access proposal is aimed at addressing that by allowing retirement fund members to have access to a portion of their already saved retirement savings. So this would effectively go into the future accessible pot, but it would be seeded on the day of promulgation or on the effective date of this legislation, effectively to try and address the immediate financial strain that working South Africans are feeling because of COVID. Because you can imagine it's going to take quite a long time to build up the accessible pot with retirement contributions. And we think that it's good to have trustee discretion around this because there'll be a lot of implications around liquidity, around the ability of funds to access this money, which has up until now been invested for the long term. So trustee discretion is a really good thing.
So I'm going to ask the obvious question, Michelle. I mean, at the end of the day, surely members' access to their retirement savings under this new system is going to reduce the member outcomes.
Actually, it's going to do quite the opposite. Because right now we have a system that allows 100% access. All you have to do is change jobs. So what we're finding now, if you look at the vast majority of members who change jobs, they're cashing out their pension fund every time they do, which means there's no long-term savings. What this system is trying to do is actually put in a preservation of 2/3 of whatever you save. So from the first day you start working, 2/3 of your contributions going in, you will only see again at retirement. The focus and where the noise has been is on the 1/3, because essentially what it's saying is that 1/3 of your contributions you can access. And I think what people don't also realize is that 1/3 is going to be an advance. If you access it before you reach retirement, that's your lump sum at retirement gone. So it's really about planning. But essentially, if you look in the long term, it just means that a portion is going to be locked away. You know it's safe. And then a second portion will be there for your retirement. But if you have an emergency beforehand, you will then be able to access it in advance. But you would be borrowing from yourself, but it removes this entire ridiculous notion of accessing pension savings when you change jobs. It is actually quite a uniquely South African phenomenon, which would then be taken out of the system.
So, I mean, if we look at, and this is what I would love to know, is that in terms of if I want to access my account and I want that money because I have an emergency, how do you determine what an emergency is? Because at the end of the day, it's almost like a subjective thing. So what would the guidelines be governing that?
Sure, I think that's been one of the biggest debates around this particular issue, is what defines an emergency.
Yeah.
And to be honest, Leanne, you having an emergency and me defining an emergency might be two very, very different things. So I think what's clear coming out of the proposals is there is not going to be a clear definition of an emergency as defined as you needing to do this or that happening, because that's just too subjective and you can't bring subjectivity in the system. The proposal will rather bring out some guardrails around how frequent you can access, minimum amounts, and of course the tax implications around any of these accesses. So it won't be sort of defining you can only access in this situation. There'll be some very, very objective guardrails that are manageable. And then it's up to the members to take responsibility and manage their money to make sure that they are only accessing this in the case of what they would call an emergency.
What happens next and what are the next steps?
Okay, so the Minister of Finance has promised us that there will be details released in June in the form of legislation. As a first step. After that, there'll be a period that's allowed for implementation. We still need to seek tax clarity as to how the tax treatment may change going forward on retirement contributions and on the savings themselves and how they're accessed and so on. But as you can imagine, there's a lot of work that would need to be done once we know the detail. Changes of rules, changes of administration systems, awareness as well, as I've spoken about. So I think, being a participant in SuperFund, which has got a professional board of trustees backed by a well-capitalized expert and experienced sponsor, puts you in a very good position because a lot of that work will be absorbed from participating employers and from members. Where it may get a bit more tricky is for those employers who still operate standalone retirement funds, who may need to be a bit more involved through the trustees that they delegate to sit on those funds.
All right, Malusi, thank you.